This lineup you see on the screen is the top projected one for tonight's Monday Night Football finale of Bills-Bengals. It's a good one to play in cash, but it's not one you should play in the big tournaments, or else you will get slaughtered with people duping your lineup. Hello, everyone. I'm Chris Spags here, ready to break down tonight's DraftKings Showdown with $1 million to first place. And at the end of the video, I will also talk about my very, very minuscule pathway to victory in Ball Mania 3. But let's get into it, guys, as we always try to do here. I will walk you guys through the Vegas odds for this one. Buffalo, 1.5 point favorite on the road against Cincinnati, 49.5 over under. That gives Buffalo an implied team total of 25.5, Cincinnati an implied team total of 24 points today. So both teams live to play heavy, both teams live to onslaught. Of course, I will reveal those top projected thanks, Steve. Steve making me laugh early on. What happened to Lindsay Lohan? Getting better day by day, much like the real Lindsay Lohan. That's all we can do here with my voice. But yes, going to show you guys some of the top projected lineups in a moment here that account for all this data, account for all these Vegas odds and all of that. First, let's look at the stochastic data, which just got updated right before the stream. So we can take a look here at some of the top plays. You can see Josh Allen according to stochastic. And as always here, I will make the plea for you guys to go sign up for stochastic for yourself. To use the data that I'm referencing here, gets updated throughout the day, gets more important and more valuable throughout the day as well, especially as inactives and stuff come in or the Vegas line moves. So keep that in mind. But Josh Allen and Joe Burrow, the clear top projected guys today. Both guys also pretty highly priced as well. 10.8 salary on Burrow, 11.4 salary on Josh Allen. Stephon Diggs coming up a good amount as well. He's an interesting play because DVP-wise, I don't think the casuals will play him as much as Jamar Chase and T. Higgins today. T. Higgins going to have the big box score days. Of course, recently, we're going to see also Jamar Chase, I think, pick up some ownership because these guys are green on DraftKings, whereas the Bills receivers, not green on DraftKings. And it might sound dumb. Of course, that's not the way that I would encourage you guys to play. It's not the way I play. It is an important part to know for how the field approaches things because a lot of casual players jump into these big tournaments and start playing guys solely based upon that DVP stat on DraftKings. Yesterday, we saw Brian Robinson get steamed up a bunch. Travis Etienne gets steamed up a bunch, well beyond any ownership projection in the industry. That's just what happens because of casual players. These days on DraftKings, they think DVP is the thing that matters. You know, as a sharp player, it doesn't matter that much, but important to consider as part of your approach overall in these kind of big slates. Joe Mixon, not popping up very much at all because of the high salary here as well as the high projection. Same thing for Devin Singletary, which is kind of interesting to note. Singletary, I'm going to pull up the optimal lineups in a second here, or the top projected ones rather, as well as what I tried to build. And frankly, Singletary doesn't come up at all, which worries me as somebody relying on Singletary. It's my faint hopes for BBM3 tonight, but also it makes an interesting play tonight because people will be going more so to James Cook. James Cook, you can see here, $5,600 price tag, a little bit cheaper than Singletary, and also pretty much the exact same projection. So I do think Singletary has some value as a pivot play from the more chalky option of Cook here, a guy who's been involved enough recently. Singletary does have the higher ceiling for the most part, but obviously these guys have been both meaningfully involved enough that you can make the case either way. I just think relative to projection, Singletary is going to be a little bit undervalued for what his role is within this team. Tyler Bass going to be an important play to note as well. It is an interesting matchup for the Bills tonight because they kick field goals at a top 10 rate in the league. 17.5% of the time they're kicking a field goal in their drives. On the Cincinnati side, they're also giving up a field goal on almost 20% of their drives. So Tyler Bass does make numeric sense. That said, if the ownership starts to creep up for a guy like Bass, you guys know from these videos you've been watching all season long, or I guess the majority of the season, I don't like kickers when they're going to be highly projected and come up very easily in optimized lineups. That's when you can start to play the variance game. You can go the other way, take the opposite kicker. That's stuff that's worked out a lot throughout showdowns over the course of the year. So if you're playing Tyler Bass tonight, that's totally fine. Just keep in mind, you're going to be probably with a large portion of the field and especially a large portion of the sharp optimizer players out there who love jamming kickers in because they have a good floor, have a good ceiling, have all that upside and all of that. Some of the value plays, or the most noteworthy value plays that could pop up a little bit. Quentin Morris here. He is a $200 guy who doesn't get a lot of reps at tight end, but theoretically could take a little bit off the table from Dawson Knox if things get lucky and go his way. Certainly not a priority play for me, but he doesn't seem like he's jammed into the optimal lineups that much. So Quentin Morris, there's a $200 guy if you need the salary savings and are willing to hold your nose to get some results that perhaps you like from the rest of your lineup. Isaiah McKenzie is really the guy that I think is important to note here at a $2,800 salary. Not a guy I like very much, but is a guy who comes up because of this projection, because of the salary number. He is going to be probably a little bit higher owned than he should be, maybe more substantially higher owned than he should be because of that price tag. And you think about it, combine all the stuff we're talking about here, the DVP stuff. If people see that Diggs is not in a great matchup, if they see that Gabe Davis is not in a great matchup according to DraftKings DVPs, they might just go down the price scale and go, well, I guess I could take McKenzie here or Dawson Knox, but theoretically with McKenzie being the value play, that's one way people might go. So I don't hate the idea of avoiding McKenzie, maybe trying some shots at him at captain in the hopes that if he does have a good day, maybe he has an outlier day. For the most part, though, I think McKenzie's going to be a little bit overrepresented tonight for what his role is and what he's done recently. Hayden Hurst, kind of an interesting play as well, coming off the injury. We know casual players don't like playing guys coming off an injury. Hayden Hurst, certainly a guy that benefits when the outside receivers get shut down. I think he's live as a play. He might even be one of the optimal captains that I think are worth going to tonight, or not optimal captains, but a guy you can get to drop some ownership down and also make some lineups that actually have a shot to bubble up all the way to give you a unique shot at winning that $1 million to first place tonight on DraftKings. Khalil Shakir, you can see here. And again, Tyler Bass, one of the top values as well. That's why he's going to come up quite a bit. The matchup makes sense. The team totals make sense. All of it's going to push people towards Tyler Bass. So just keep that in mind if you are going to Tyler Bass heavy today. And I'll scan through quickly here so you guys can take a look at the stochastic data if there's anything that you want to identify for yourself. Obviously, pay for it, I think would be the first thing I would say for anybody out there. But I know sometimes people do like to look at this and make their either or decisions in their fantasy football leagues and all of that. So here are the stochastic projections for you. Do what you want with them. I will highlight as well Gabe Davis here. Gabe Davis, interesting matchup for him. Cincinnati on the year is 31st versus wide receiver 2 is giving up a 29% DVOA boost to the position. Davis, we know, a guy who's bombed really more often than he probably should have this year. He's really only had 1 or 2 ceiling games, or really 1 ceiling game, and then one pretty good game he's had pretty much throughout the course of this year. That said, for him to go off in week 17 would be the thing that we all know as players who have been browbeaten by fantasy football. Gabe Davis going off in week 17 when a lot of people don't have him would not be a shocker here because of his bad projection and not great salary. I think he's an interesting captain play to go to tonight. We'll look at the ownership from Stochastic as well. Let's see if they gave an update on this too. No, they didn't. Okay. So last update's 13 hours ago. Obviously, this will change throughout the course of the day, which is why you should get a membership. I think they have some free like 5-day deals as well over there as well. So check it out. I'm saying as well too many times. Check it out over at Stochastic. They do have some good promos going. If you are new to this data world and want to get some sharp data in your life that pros actually use, I'd very much recommend for them, as well as Football Outsiders, of course, for the advanced analytics that are going to help make the decisions that you need to have some value in your life. Josh Allen, though, you can see high ownership projected overall. A lot going at captain too, 69% ownership, which is going to be not so nice for Josh Allen overall. Worth pointing out, because I do often talk about my fantasy cruncher groups, not forcing in a pass catcher with Josh Allen, the flex, and forcing in a pass catcher with him if I play him at captain. That's how I'm going about that one. Same thing for Joe Burrow as well. Both guys have pretty big shares of their rushing touchdowns on the year. Joe Burrow's got 39% of the Bengals rushing touchdowns. Josh Allen has 47% of the Bills rushing touchdowns. That's why those guys are a little more able to be played just by themselves. Normally for a QB, you do want to stack them up with a pass catcher and force that in, because a pass catcher can easily pass a QB if the QB doesn't have a big day. Jamar Chase here, going to be decently owned. I honestly wouldn't be shocked if this were a little bit lower. Wouldn't be shocked if it's a little bit higher, because those DVP numbers, which again will highlight Jamar Chase as a guy that the casuals are going to want to go to. They also might, if they're sharp casuals, which is sort of a weird phrase to say, but people that know a little bit more than the average bear, but are still basically the average bear, they might go to Jamar Chase a little bit heavier because of the fact that T. Higgins has been good recently. That's sort of a known quantity for a lot of the casual players out there. So I think Jamar Chase's ownership wouldn't shock me to see him closer to 60% overall. Wouldn't shock me to see him closer to 15% to 20% at captain. I think he's a play that'll be pretty well represented tonight, despite the fact that he really hasn't gone off recently meaningfully. And I will also talk briefly about the fact that I do think Tre'Davious White being back out there matters a lot. I know I follow the data week to week, as you guys know from all the content I do here on Splash Play. And of course, subscribe down below, hit the like button. I appreciate all that very much if you can. But I would say that one thing that's jumped out to me is how the Bills throughout the course of the early parts of the year, terrible against wide receiver ones. Then we see Tre'Davious White come back in. All of a sudden, their DVOA numbers versus wide receiver ones start to slowly trickle down. And it's still not all the way there, because they were bad for really, 70% of the season up top, but they were giving up an 11% DVOA boost, 26 in the league overall. I don't think that's what the situation is right now with Tre'Davious White in. I think as a result, Jamar Chase to me is one of my biggest risk profiles that I would see on tonight's slate. I'll play him some. We know he's an alpha receiver, and alpha receivers can beat any matchup, but I do think that he's going to be a guy that gets a little bit overplayed because of the name, because of the fact he hasn't gone off recently, and because there are some positive stats showing that the Bills have been bad versus wide receiver ones. They're not the same team right now, and I think that certainly gives a little bit of an upside to guys like T. Higgins, guys like Tyler Boyd, and guys like Hayden Hurst as well, just as leverage against Jamar Chase, and the fact that I think he will be pretty highly owned. Sort by captain ownership here. Josh Allen going to be the highest owned captain, not a surprise there. Joe Burrow going to be the highest owned captain on the Bengals side, not a surprise there. I think Burrow and Chase, to me, probably come out about even. A captain would be my guess for their ownership projections. Diggs, I think, will be a little bit less owned. I mean, It's tough because he's an alpha receiver. So this number is probably about right. Diggs, though, will get a 12 ranked DVP matchup according to DraftKings, which is not that bright, shiny green lights that casual players just love to gravitate towards and click. As a result, I think that Diggs probably is not going to get steamed up too much out of the course of this day. Same thing for Gabe Davis, who projects for under 5% ownership. Again, these are guys right here. Hurst, Davis. I'm going to show you guys some lineups that I think are unique that I would play tonight. And I think for these guys in particular, Hurst and Davis, they're not the sexiest plays, but if you are trying to get different on a slate with $1 million up top and also pretty big entry fees, I would say that going to Gabe Davis and Hurst is one way if you're trying to do that uncut, pure one bullet shot of winning $1 million. Going to Hurst, going to Davis, going to Tyler Boyd. I think these guys are pretty good plays. Will go underrepresented because of the fact that they're not the alpha receivers. They're not going to put in captain lineups a lot, and certainly they can get there with a high total game and also two really good defenses on both sides. So let's go over to the crunch that I did here. We can see the optimal lineups, and this is the most important part of the video, as I always try to say in the short form ones, where I get to really edit myself and not ramble on incoherently for too long. But the captain builds here are going to be favoring Josh Allen, 68% Josh Allen. He's in every lineup overall, 32% utility, 68% in captain in these top 25 projected lineups. Joe Burrow at captain coming up 24% of the time. He's also coming up in utility 76% of the time. So one thing you could do if you're running an optimizer or if you're hand building would be right away to play only one of Josh Allen or Joe Burrow. I'm not saying that's the right move, but if you are trying to get away from large chunks of the field and you don't have 150 entries to go around, that's one thing you can do right away is just know how the field's going to build, know they're going to have 100% of, and then just don't play one of those guys. That's what helped me when I had my big win a couple weeks ago with the Bengals-Browns game, where it's basically I separated out Joe Burrow and T. Higgins. T. Higgins ends up getting there. Joe Burrow doesn't. Same case here. Obviously not as much of a correlation play as it is with Burrow and Higgins as it would be for Allen and Burrow. But the point is that these guys just come up everywhere. So it doesn't really matter about the correlation. It doesn't matter about the push-pull. It's just about knowing how people are going to build. And as I always say in these videos, it's about knowing where people are going to put their little monopoly hotels, and you try to put yours somewhere else that other people just aren't going to be. Other notes here, again, a lot of Tyler Bass coming up. 56% of the top 25 lineups have Tyler Bass in it. Another 24% of Evan McPherson. That's part of why I always separate the kickers. Kickers do leverage against each other. It is very hard for two kickers to get there in the same lineup unless the game goes really weird. And even if it does get there, usually more people play two kickers in lineups than actually win. So that's why I never play two kickers or two defenses. That's just something my personal take, but your mileage may vary for what you want to do. For the defenses, no Bengals coming up, some Bills coming up. I think both defenses are good values on the slate overall, good opportunities rather relative to the ownership, relative to the projection. People won't play as much as they should, but we know Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, two guys who drop back a lot. Certainly no strangers to throwing picks either. So I think the defenses are certainly in play today. Other notes here, let's go to the team stacks tab, which is, I always say, the most important part of what you can look at when you're looking at these top 25 projected lineups and figuring out what the field's going to do. So 21 out of 25 lineups have at least 3 Bills in them. That makes me favor perhaps 4-2 Cincinnati Bills a little bit more than I would otherwise. As you guys know, I love onslaughts. I do find it a little bit hard to believe that this would be an onslaught game. I'm still wanting to play some because, again, it's just about building lineups where people won't be doing that. But that said, there's not a lot of 5-1 builds coming up in the top 25. So you can play the 5-1 builds. You can play the onslaughts for either team. They're fully in play, and they also win more. A lot more people usually play them. That said, in this particular game, it feels like you could see at least 2 guys getting there from each side as a safety, as a kind of floor play there. So I think a 4-2 build for the Bengals or a 4-2 build for Buffalo would be a little more appealing. But either way, though, the Bills side going to be represented here again. 11 with 3-player stacks, 9 with 4-player stacks, and then 1 Bills onslaught coming up in the top 25 lineups. Other things to identify here, again, no Devin Singletary at all. This really jumps out to me. Also, no Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon, certainly a tough situation for him going against the Bills defense on the year versus the run. They've been one of the best teams in the league according to DVOA. Negative 20% DVOA, negative 0.129 rushing EPA per play. Those are bad numbers going against the Bills defense. So Joe Mixon, we know, can get bottled up. We also know he's a volume guy. He could certainly have some upside. But with him and P. Ryan out there, it's sort of splitting snaps. I would certainly play some of those guys, but I think, if you're going to load up on them, that's probably not the wisest move either. You are kind of running into a buzzsaw based on how this Bills defense performs. I would target the pass games more, but again, if they're not coming up in these top 25 lineups, those guys just have a little more value because of the fact that they're not going to come up easily for anybody who's running an optimizer or running projections, really any projection system out there. Wide receivers, you can see no T. Higgins coming up in the top 25. That's certainly interesting here. I'll talk a little bit more about my best Ball Mania 3 team in a second. But one thing that put the fear of God into me yesterday was when I saw that 2 of my key guys, Brian Robinson and Tyler Algier, were in every single lineup. Today, I'm rooting for T. Higgins, so I'm glad to see Higgins is not going to be the chalk play of the week being jammed in here quite as much. The DVP numbers, again, on DraftKings will make Higgins look like a good play to casuals, but if you're going to play Higgins, you're probably playing more than with those casuals than you are with the projection bros and the guys running optimizers, the guys spending the big money. So that's something to keep in mind there, where I do think Higgins gains a little value at captain. I sort of have to juggle, like, do I want to go heavy on Higgins because he is one of my pathways potentially sneaking out a 1% win in the Best Ball Mania 3 tournament. But for you guys out there, like, Higgins is a live play because of the fact that he's just not coming up here. Gabe Davis not coming up very much. Dawson Knox coming up very little as well. So all these guys are sort of underrepresented. And as a result, if they hit that ceiling day, less people will just be on them. So that's one of the things to keep in mind. I think there's a lot of the lower tier pass catchers, or not even lower tier, just like not alpha pass catchers, who are going to be a little bit underowned relative to what they could do on this kind of slate. And a game too with two great offenses that know they're going against a great defense. And as a result, you sometimes can see them pass even more above expectation because they know they have to do that just to get ahead of the defense and have a shot to stay alive in the game. We talked about, again, Burrow and Allen in every lineup. Running backs, no Singletary, no Mixon, no Pirine, no Naheem Hines. All those guys live as well. And then the kickers we talked about as well. So let's hit on some lineups that I think are pretty unique to go to and would be certainly more of a thought starter than I would recommend you absolutely playing these exact lineups. But I do think they represent angles that look pretty good to me as well. Joe Burrow at captain, Jamar Chase, Stephon Diggs, Tyler Boyd, Evan McPherson, Hayden Hurst. 49.2 salary means you're getting a little bit more unique. Of course, the fact that it's a 5-1 Bengals onslaught also means that it is pretty unique as well. So those are things that look pretty good to me. You are taking one of the top pass catchers here in Jamar Chase, but you also could maybe make this exact same lineup and swap over to T. Higgins and get even more salary savings. They both look pretty good. Overall, though, I would say from my perspective, like this 5-1 here with Diggs, no Allen, you're getting away from a pretty big chunk of the field. You're also playing a very narrow outcome possibility here just because of the fact that it's hard to imagine there only being one Bill who gets there. But that said, this seems like a spot where you could see Diggs be, the one receiver who gets there out of a Bills lineup. And as we talked about before, if you're playing 5-1 onslaught builds, the one receiver coming back is usually the one that hits in the one side. It's not usually a QB, not usually a running back, unless that running back's a pass catcher. So Diggs, Gabe Davis, they could both be the one in a 5-1 onslaught, and you can feel pretty good about. Rummy saying, get my man Spags a lozenge. Yes, this is my healing process as people have seen me being sick over the last month, but unfortunately, you got to deal with what you get here. My voice sounds better than yesterday. My voice sounds better than last week. So all we can do for everybody out there is improve day by day as we get ravaged by child illnesses. And Mike Bumps saying, where's Kanye West? I don't know what this means. I don't know what that am I getting like negged somehow with that one? You tell me in the chat. 4-2 build with Gabe Davis. The captain looks pretty good to me. Gabe Davis, as I talked about, getting that wide receiver 2 matchup. That's shockingly good against the Bengals overall. But I think the main thing for Gabe Davis is that if you want to really win one of these tournaments, you want to have one of those ceiling days that nobody is on. That's the spot that I think is pretty appealing to me to go to Gabe Davis. Certainly you don't want to play him, 50% in my lineups at captain. Certainly don't want to play him a bunch. But if the field's going to play him at 5%, what's the harm in playing him at 10%? In hopes that you do capture that microscopic, very unlikely Gabe Davis day. This is a spot to do it. The Bengals D has been good. The Bills defense has been good. Those are both things that I think favor him a little bit here. We're also getting to a 4-2 Bengals build, which is a positive, which means that I don't mind getting to the full salary spend here, $50,000. For the most part, on a slate this big, you do not want to spend $50,000 because the likelihood of you being duped just goes up exponentially. But I think because we decrease the ownership project a little bit here by going to Gabe Davis, the captain, we're fading Diggs, we're fading the running backs, we're fading Tyler Bass, we're fading a lot of the guys who are going to pick up a lot of ownership. We're also going to Samaje Perine here. Like, we've done enough weird things you can have a $50,000 salary and not feel too bad about it. Steven saying, seems teams are running more/better versus the Bills lately. Totally anecdotal thing. I haven't pulled up the recent stats, and I try not to look at like last 4 week stats too much because I think people sometimes get lost in that stuff a little bit much and miss the bigger picture. I personally think that's more of just, like guys who've gotten the big plays against the Bills have been sort of outlier players like Dalvin Cook breaking a big run. Who's going to be that guy for Cincinnati? Like, I don't think it's Joe Mixon. Joe Mixon would certainly not be a guy that would, for the most part, have that outlier ability. Like, he caught those 5 touchdown passes or had the big day with 5 touchdowns, caught some touchdown passes in that one. But he's not really a guy who's breaking 80-yard runs on the year. His avoided tackle rate is a very low 12%. And the Bills do miss tackles at an 8% rate, which is not a good mark. I just don't think he's that guy that has that ability at this point of his career. He's more of a Saquon Barkley, who I've sort of warned you guys about / kind of been wrong about sometimes. But volume backs are sort of hard to get a read on because it doesn't take just one play for them to get there. It takes the brunt force of them getting there over and over and over again. And I don't think Mixon can have that be a thing that's in his repertoire. Rummy saying Pirine would have more success downhill. I think that's certainly a possibility. He's had a little more juice this year, has a higher avoided tackle rate at 16% as well. I think I would go more Perrine's way if you're expecting the big play. And that's why this lineup on the screen, I think, does make some sense. Mike saying when you use both quarterbacks, you stay away from doing that. I think you have to use both quarterbacks in some lineups just because these guys are the top projected players. Certainly a lot of the offense will funnel through them. But like I said in the beginning of the looking at the optimizer, these guys are both coming up in 100% of the top projected lineups. So in that perspective, like you can take one away and that could be your stand on the night. It's just that one of Allen or Burrow gets there. You don't even have to just make it like, oh, I'm only playing Allen lineups. I'm only playing Burrow lineups. It could be like I'm playing 25% only Allen lineups, 25% only Burrow lineups, 25% with both those guys at utility. And then you just avoid him at captain, or you take that last 25% to take him at captain. But that's sort of what I would try to do overall. But again, it's sort of it's tough because like I like to play aggressively. Like I like to play for the narrow outcomes, which is tough if you don't have a really big bankroll, and I don't either. So like I'm right on the same page with you guys. But I think that's one of the things that, you know, is sort of your mileage may vary, where it's much safer to play both Burrow and Allen. But if you want to go for the gusto, if you want to get away from a pretty big chunk of the field, playing only one of Burrow and Allen at some portion of your lineups is a pretty widest move. And then playing none of them of those two, it's a really unlikely outcome, but that can hit. And if that does hit, you're basically going to be with like 5% of lineups in the tournament, if not even less. So that's something that it's all about your risk aversion. It's all about your appetite for willing to go for the gusto and your ability to afford that if it does go wrong. The last lineups I'm going to highlight here, and I pulled two because I just think a 3-3 Hurst captain kind of spoke to me a little bit here. And I'm not like some Hayden Hurst sycophant. I thought he was one of the better parts of the offense throughout this year, which kind of bummed me out to not have him in some of my underdog teams and my DraftKings teams as well when he was hurt the last few weeks. But he's been a key part of this offense in a way that I think is sort of going to hurt T. Higgins to have him back out there. Also going to hurt Tyler Boyd a little. Jamar Chase, you know, the ceiling's always there. But it's not a surprise to me that Higgins has had his outlier days in a couple games without Hurst out there. So I think that's one way to sort of get leverage against everything that people think about the slate because of what we talked about with the DVP, with some of the obvious plays that Jamar Chase and T. Higgins will be to casuals. If you go to Hayden Hurst at captain, you can get different. So I have a Hurst at captain, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis, Tyler Boyd lineup here. I also think this one with Hurst at captain, Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Stephon Diggs, Devin Singletary, and Tyler Boyd looks good. Singletary, just the appeal there is that people aren't going to play him. So that's one thing that really does speak to me is that he doesn't come up as well projected. Even in my batch crunch here with randomness on, you're only getting Devin Singletary in 1.3% of lineups. And he's a guy that has been a core part of this offense. He's had some outlier days, who's in the past been fed pretty aggressively down the home stretch of last season. And I think he's getting fed pretty well this year. Obviously, James Cook is a big part of it, but I think people will go to James Cook a little more easily because of the price tag and because these guys are basically 1-to-1. So that's the kind of thing that I think you can get some advantage on. So that's why for me, I wanted to represent here like Gabe Davis, a good play, but Singletary also right there as well. Nice salaries here, 48.5, 49.1. Those are things that certainly stand out. Owen saying good call on Evans and ride or die. He was my number one swap off Hopkins for a not amazing but profitable day in Underdog. That's one thing that we could talk about more as we get through the playoffs, but I didn't identify that as much as I probably should, where I'm so down on the Bucs. I'm so down on what they've done all year long. But the fact that the Carolina team does blitz a lot and also doesn't get home a lot, that can open up checkdowns underneath, which is what Tom Brady's taken advantage of the most this year, especially last week, where both Fournette and Rachaad White got fed heavily in the pass game. But when teams blitz a lot, but they don't have success blitzing, that means that he opens up things downfield. And that's what Brady did yesterday, took massive advantage of. And I wish I'd played it more. I played all of my teams yesterday, DFS-wise, trying to get leverage on my own Best Ball Mania team. And the result was like, I took a lot of Saquon Barkley, took a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown. The chalk plays that were really important that busted didn't get to the Tom Brady's of the world, didn't get to the Mike Evans. So if you are trying to be like me and leverage against your best ball teams in the hopes of having DFS success, if best ball doesn't go your way, that's not the way to do it. It's what I learned firsthand yesterday. But we can talk more about that in a moment here. So here's my Best Ball Mania 3 team. Actually, no, I have to give my 3 pro tips. Let's go back to here. 3 pro tips to get different on tonight's slate. Number 1, be unafraid to play one of Josh Allen or Joe Burrow. I think that's the key pro tip here. That's the most important thing that stands out. When you see 2 guys who are in every single lineup, just avoiding one of them and avoiding both of them if you really want to go for the gusto, but really just trying to separate those guys. If you want to try to make money tonight, if you want to get away from the field and display that opposite outcome, it's very likely these guys are both in a winning lineup. But that said, just trying to capture those limited opportunities you have to actually win the big prize. That's the first, most important pro tip I can give you guys. Second pro tip would be don't run away from the running backs, I guess. I think that's an important one to highlight. I don't like Joe Mixon, but if people aren't going to play him, there is value playing Joe Mixon. Same thing for Singletary, who I do like a little bit more. Same thing for P. Ryan, who I would say I also like a little bit more. Those guys are all valuable plays because people aren't going to play him. And that's the kind of thing people miss about Showdown. It's not about the plays you love the most. It's not about the plays that are the best plays, not even about the best projected plays. Certainly you have to keep that in mind when you're building lineups, but it's just about who are the guys who have a tangible ceiling that aren't going to get there. I might not like Mixon. You might not like Mixon. Everybody out there probably doesn't like Mixon. So as a result, Mixon gains some value because people just don't want to play him. Third pro tip, I think be careful with Tyler Bass. Like, he's going to come up really easily. I think he's going to make a lot of sense to people out there. Any advanced metric stuff will also support the kicking field goals rate and also the Bengals giving up field goals rate. But we all know from these showdown slates that kickers sometimes just fail. Kickers sometimes don't get there, or sometimes it could be an Evan McPherson going the opposite way. So that's the kind of thing that I think is a lot of appeal, is just going to Evan McPherson, fading Tyler Bass. But I'll still play some amount of him. Obviously, he's going to make a lot of lineups work easily because of that value metric he has. But because of that value metric he has, if you play Tyler Bass, you're going to be alongside holding hands with the sharpest players in the game. We're going off projections, and that's always a dangerous thing to go to. All right. We'll wrap this up in a moment here, but let's talk about my Best Ball Mania 3 team. And honestly, you know what? I'm going to throw a little shade at our pal Eric Beinfor over at Spike Week, who did not dig that deeply into what the people of the paths of victory are in Best Ball Mania, I think. Certainly a lot of guys out there relying on some configuration of my guys. For the most part, though, for my guys today, you can see my team here, which had some disappointments yesterday, but waiting on Joe Burrow here to give me my first QB points, waiting on Devin Singletary to hopefully bounce one of these guys, waiting on T. Higgins, hopefully bounce one of these guys. Really wish Cole Kmet had given me a little bit more yesterday, but at this point, and again, this is one of the things I'll say up top as well. I love Pat Kerrane. Like, I've given a lot of credit to Pete, of course, my podcast partner here on Splash Play. If you miss him, you can watch him on Friday here with me, of course, doing our usual flagship show. But like Kerrane and Pete and also Gretsch doing ship chasing is part of what infused me with love for best ball. So if Kerrane wins this, that is one of the good guys who would be winning this tournament. There's some guys who you know that I personally don't like, that maybe some of you don't like out there, who could also have won this tournament and now have no shot to win it. So Kerrane winning, a good thing if it's not me. That said, I want to fucking catch Kerrane and I want to win this tournament. So my pathway to doing that would be, looks like a 30-ish point game from Burrow and then 25-ish point games from Singletary and Higgins. And that would be my way to jump. Obviously, there's a risk of somebody else having one of Higgins, having one of Singletary as well, as these guys being people who certainly are decently owned, but nobody's got all three. So that's where I think this is probably somebody who runs a probability-based company that creates sports betting data and all that. I would say right now it's like a 1% chance of me winning Best Ball Mania or even finishing within the top 10. But I do think that I'm still live right now. I'm still certainly sweating it. Fantasy Flock has too much Derrick Henry to win. I think the running back. So here's the thing, like, let's look at Kerrane's team real fast. And if you guys missed the sweat stream that he did with Pete and the guys yesterday, and Gretsch as well, of course, all the ship chasing crew. I think Leone was on that as well. I think I watched it. So like Leone was on it as well. Great stream to watch. Watch Pat actually kind of work through the process here and figure out how good of a shot he has. His team here is really solid across the board, really looking good of everything. Oh, here we go. Leone made a chart of the top BBM 3 teams and what players have remaining. If you're interested to see what you're fading, Spags. I don't know, man. I think it's really thin for me, but I do think there is sort of an outcome that can occur here. It's just like a micro outcome. Like, if you thought Tom Brady was going to put up 38 points in week 17, God bless you. Same thing for Daniel Jones putting up 36. That one, I guess, makes a little more sense. But Brady, with what we saw all year, with what happened all year with him, with how he disappointed all year and didn't create value for any of his receivers, Kerrane to get here with Tom Brady and also no outlier Mike Evans day. I mean, kudos to him, man. Like, again, like here we got Nick saying was written for you, Spags, but at least one of the other good guys is in line. I fully agree with that one. That's how I'm viewing it. That said, I'm not throwing in the towel. Like, it might be reminiscent of some politicians out there. I'm not conceding until it's over. And I think right now my team has a shot. But basically, if you want to see a Spags win, then you are certainly trying to see Joe Burrow go off. And I think too, this will jump me a pretty decent amount into the cash line here, where if Burrow gives me 30, then that's already going to put me at like 132. And then the hope would be that my Devin Singletary day can replace A.J. Dillon, or I guess I have two outs here because I could replace Cole Kmet, A.J. Dillon, or I guess Tyreek could theoretically be replaced. But overall, it's a really narrow margin of success for me here, where it's got to be Higgins going off, it's got to be Singletary going off, and it's got to be Burrow absolutely lighting things on fire, but also in a way that doesn't raise the entire first place line. So real thin needle to thread, real thin opportunity cost there. But that's what it is for me. And I'm stoked to just be able to get some QB points to take away the 0 from Trey Lance. But it's tough, man. Like, I will say for anybody out there who's like sweating this stuff, I told my friends about it, told them about sort of my gifting kind of approach and all the stuff I was going to do with the money if I somehow won it. I got touchdowns from all these guys. Like, I got touchdowns from all these dudes. Tyreek gave me a touchdown. Not Dotson, I don't think. Jefferson certainly did not give a touchdown or anything. So that's the one thing that's a little bit tough. But got touchdowns from Ayu, got touchdown from People Jones, got touchdowns from DJ Moore, got a touchdown from Komet. Did Kittle get a touchdown? You got 10 points, so whatever. It doesn't really matter. Either way, I was so excited to see my guys getting touchdowns bright and early here. A.J. Dillon gets a touchdown. Algier gets a touchdown. That's still not enough to carry you through, and that's sort of the tilting part of it where I'll admit, like, I was in the afternoon slate just like bummed on the couch, admittedly after drinking 2 bottles of champagne with mimosas, because that's how I cope with my stress levels of all this stuff going on. But it's definitely one of those things where it's all, like, I won't say it's all luck, because obviously you see a skilled drafter like Pat in first place, but I do think there's a pretty big luck component to all of this that I've been talking about all season long, that I've been sort of beating the drum of all season long. What we talked about, Mike, we've moved on here, but I talked about this already. I would say the defenses are both good at stopping the run versus the pass. They are also pretty solid as well. They're both good defenses for the most part. So that's the main thing to keep in mind. I would not chase Trenton Irwin, especially with Hayden Hurst back in. That seems like kind of a sucker bet, but that's my take. Tyler Algier was the Spags tout of the year. Yes, it was. And unfortunately, I mean, I'm glad he's making the final lineup here. I'm glad that he's giving me points and all of that. Brian Robinson, though, once I saw fucking every dumb player out there playing Brian Robinson, I was like, oh no, this is going to go poorly. And I was kind of feeling that in advance of the slate as well. But yeah, Robinson just being the chalk play against the soft defense, that's all stuff that, like, I really have a tough time with. So that's... it's tilting. Like, it's hard to not be tilted when you're this close and you don't get it to the finish line. But again, to have a shot, I guess, like a microscopic shot, I feel like a 1% shot to win tonight. I'll take it. I'll take my bonus Burrow points to get me a little bit more cash out of this one, and hopefully pass the fantasy flock so I can just rub that in the internet's face for the next year of my life. But for the most part, though, you build good teams, you build the best teams, and sometimes they work out for shit. Like my DraftKings team, holy cow, that one completely shit the bed. I won't even pull it up because it's that embarrassing. Legit, Elijah Moore made my DraftKings team over Justin Jefferson because of how bad he was. And obviously Kirk Cousins is my QB there. So Kirk Cousins did nothing as a result of Justin Jefferson doing nothing. That's a tough part where there's a lot of things I kind of want to dig into in the offseason. But I really do feel like it's really thin overall to kind of feel like you have a good shot because of the fact that, like, there's a lot that just has to go your way. You can get all the touchdowns and then you don't have the stud running back. You get all the touchdowns and your stud receiver does fucking nothing. That's the tough part for me that I think will certainly be a thing to discuss, as well as the fact of, like, how do you balance, like, the Josh Jacobses, the guys, the Tony Pollards, the guys who got you through those first 14 weeks and then were absolute duds in the playoffs. Like, I don't know how you balance that out. Like, I just don't know how that all starts to make sense for me, but that's what the offseason's for. And that's what I think all of our hopes and dreams are for in 2023. Thank you for the positivity, Carlos. I don't know, Spags, your lineup looks like it has a really good shot. I think it has a shot. The tough part is just the other people blocking you with the similar players. So not a lot of Singletary out there. Not a lot of Burrow and Higgins out there who's ahead of me and in a shot to win. So, or like they can't, they're not replacing a 0. They're replacing like 30 points. Like, those guys have a tough shot to win. I think I have a lot of easily replaceable guys, could be a little more easily replaceable. The main thing I needed, though, was like Cole Kmet going off. I needed Cole Kmet to put up 20 and I would have been pretty good. But I appreciate the positivity either way. And I appreciate all you guys hanging out with me here. Of course, I'm doing these shows 5 days a week. That won't stop, even with the offseason coming up, even with the playoffs coming up, obviously. So please, I got to pull up the neon flashing GIF or else I feel completely naked. Where's the GIF? Okay, subscribe. That's me doing a little bit of a Muppet voice. Subscribe, like, and comment down below, please. I appreciate the support here. Of course, we are building this channel up come hell or high water. Best ball season, whether I luck out tonight or not, we'll continue that grind coming up. Playoff best ball, I'm excited for as well. Been blasting off on some of those teams, so not quite as much as my podcast partner, Pete. But I appreciate all you guys coming along with me on the ride. And if somehow we do luck this one out, if we do pull out that 1% outcome, we'll be giving away 4 Best Ball Mania, 4 fully funded entries, and also giving some money to people in my life I want. So, root for me if you want, root for Kareem if he's very safely locked into first place. But some good guys hopefully will pull this off today. And I'm rooting for me, but I'm rooting for anybody who's going to get a shot here. And Irwin hunts alligators. Andrew Sitzar says, what better way to go out here? But I really do appreciate you guys hanging out with me. And I will be back with you guys tomorrow for a week 18 first look. That's probably going to be absolutely meaningless based on the injuries and all the shit that's going to go on. But we'll try it out anyway. So thanks for hanging with me, guys. Follow me at Chris Spags. Follow the show at Splash Play Pod. I'll see you guys again soon. Good luck.